Okay, let's talk a little bit about game mechanics now. We're going to get finally into sort of the nitty gritty of how to construct mechanics, rules, logic, and loops. So, what is a game? There are a couple of definitions that we could use. So, this one is from Crash Course Games. There's a link there that you can check out to actually watch this episode if you're interested in seeing their intro to video games as an educational concept. So Crash Course says, a game is a construct that organizes play through a set of rules for the purpose of achieving goals, overcoming an obstacle, or attaining an objective. This definition is from The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell, which again is a book that I highly recommend reading if you're just starting out with game design. So Schell says, a game is a problem-solving activity approached with a playful attitude. And in fact, he has a whole bunch of other sort of a list of definitions. So he says games are entered willfully, games have goals, games have conflict, games have rules, games can be won and lost, games are interactive, games have challenge, games can create their own internal value, games engage players, and games are closed formal systems. But the definition that he kind of shortens that down to is a game is a problem-solved activity approached with a playful attitude. So here's the definition that I used. A game is an engaging system of rules which players agree to learn and play by in order to complete an objective, goal, or challenge. So that kind of combines some of the ideas that we've seen in these previous definitions. We can see that games usually have a rule set of some kind. They usually have an objective or a goal of some kind. They always have players. And they have to be approached playfully. So it can't be something that you're like forced to do. It has to be something that you're sort of like consenting to abide by the rules, right? Okay. So before we talk about what a game mechanic is, let's first look at one more way to think about a game. So this is a diagram you may have seen from me before. This is the game system diagram, and it is made up of 4 parts. So in the game system diagram, you first start with a control, an input. This is an action that's performed by the player, or it's an input performed by the player, so on some kind of usually mechanical system. So that could be a controller, mouse and keyboard. There's a lot of different things. That input is sort of taken up by the game program. So the game program applies a rule to that input of some kind. From there, it will output some kind of feedback for the player. So that could be something visual on the screen. It could be a sound. There's a lot of different ways that we can categorize feedback. And finally, the player will take that feedback, and based on that, they'll make a new decision. And that decision will require them to put in an input, right? And so you can see from this system that a game requires a player in order for this loop to be complete. There's the game program, which is the thing that you make, and then there's also a player who interprets the rules, tries to learn them, inputs controls, and like interprets your feedback. So I've I like this concept of the magic circle. This is a concept that was attributed to Johann Huizinga in Homo Ludens, a study of the play element in culture, and I found it very helpful to visualize the play experience as this magic circle. So the quote from the book is, all play moves and has its being within a playground marked off beforehand, either materially or ideally, deliberately or as a matter of course. Just as there is no formal difference between play and ritual, so the consecrated spot cannot be formally distinguished from the playground. The arena, the card table, the magic circle, the temple, the stage, the screen, the tennis court, the court of justice, etc., are all in form and function playgrounds, i.e. forbidden spots, isolated, hedged around, hallowed, in which special rules obtain. All are temporary worlds within the ordinary world, dedicated to the performance of an act apart. So if you imagine a playground or a sports field or lines drawn in the grass, and the rules told to you by another child, you agree to play because you want to be transported or included or to pass time. So the concept necessarily involves both the player and the rules in a greater system, and this is very helpful for understanding how to create a play experience. I consider play to be a cultural ritual or pastime. So games and rules create like a boundary or a space, and when the player steps inside the magic of the magic circle, which is a new experience, that can happen. So games happen in the space where the rules intersect with the desire to play, explore, or learn. And again, the concept necessarily involves both the player and the rules as part of a greater system. So from those definitions of what a game is, a game mechanic is a combination of a player action, including the control input, and the application of one or more game rules, resulting in feedback to the player. So every time you write a game mechanic, you can kind of keep in mind that you should probably be thinking about the input that the player is making, the rule that is actually being applied, and the feedback that is going to be given back to the player. And then ideally, you're also getting to a place where you can, to some degree, manipulate the experience or the action of the player so that you have an expectation of the action that they're going to do next. So a core loop is a set of actions by the player and mechanics by the game system that are performed frequently to produce part of the game experience. So a core loop is often derived directly from your gameplay pillars, although it can be more detailed than that. When you're writing your GDD, this is a really great place to involve diagrams in your process of developing mechanics, as a loop implies that there's going to be a series of actions that lead back into one another. So the core loop is happening over and over again, right, as you play. And it's the core part of it means that this is a set of mechanics that are being performed frequently, like over and over. So here's another definition of a game, what's more from our game design perspective. A game can be a system of overlapping core loops, which are made up of mechanics, which are a combination of rules and player interactions. So from there, your controls and your rules can be synthesized to create programming logic. So one goal of your GDD is to communicate enough about the rules that a programmer could start making a playable prototype. And so one of the things that you can do, you can make a table, again, that contains your control input, your rule, your feedback, and then you could include a section of logic that actually sort of writes out in English steps, like pseudocode, how you would expect that to be programmed in the game. And this would be one way to reduce that vagueness that was talked about in the game design tips section. So this is one way to get really specific about what your mechanics are going to be and how they're going to be implemented.